December 17, 1667. Gondar, Ethiopian Empire. A Portuguese diplomat's body lies crumpled beneath the walls of Fasil Ghebbi Castle, his neck broken, his face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. The Imperial guard finds something clutched in his cold hand, tufts of coarse brown fur. But it's what the guards discover in the eastern courtyard that stops them cold. A troop of olive baboons, their faces still stained with blood, sitting calmly around the body of another intruder, watching the castle gates with unblinking intelligence. The official report would claim bandits were responsible. The Portuguese embassy would demand answers. But the truth was far more terrifying. Emperor Fasilides hadn't just built the most impregnable fortress in East Africa, he had created something else entirely, a security system that blurred the line between military innovation and primal horror, where trained primates became the perfect killing machines, unable to be bribed, incapable of mercy, absolutely loyal to a single chilling command: attack only those who come in darkness. Before we uncover the truth about the Gondar castle guard baboons and Emperor Fasilides' fortress primates that attacked only night infiltrators, make sure to subscribe to Fierce Sermon and ring that notification bell. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our community of mystery seekers around the world. Now let's descend into one of history's most unusual and terrifying security experiments. The year is 1635, and the Ethiopian Empire stands at a crossroads. Emperor Fasilides, newly crowned after the tumultuous reign of his father Susenyos, faces enemies on all sides. Portuguese Jesuit missionaries seek to convert his empire to Catholicism. Ottoman forces press from the coast. Oromo warriors raid from the south. And within his own court, whispers of assassination plots filter through palace corridors like poison smoke. Fasilides is not a man prone to paranoia, but he is acutely aware of history. His grandfather, Emperor Sarsa Dengel, died defending his empire from invaders. His own father nearly lost the throne to religious civil war. The lesson is clear. In 17th century Ethiopia, a ruler survives by controlling his ground absolutely, by creating spaces where betrayal becomes impossible, where every shadow is watched, where every approach is guarded. So Fasilides makes a decision that will echo through 3 centuries. He will build a new capital at Gondar, in the highlands north of Lake Tana, where the air is thin and clear, where approaching armies can be seen for miles across the plains. More importantly, he will construct a castle complex, Fasil Ghebbi, that represents a revolutionary approach to royal security. Stone towers will rise 40 feet high. Walls will be thick enough to withstand cannon fire. But these conventional defenses are merely the beginning. The emperor has spent time studying defenses across his empire and beyond. He has heard tales from Arab traders about the great fortresses of Constantinople, where Greek fire and strategic architecture created supposedly impregnable walls. He has consulted with Portuguese architects, before expelling most of them, about European castle design. But Fasilides also possesses something these foreign advisors lack: an intimate understanding of the Ethiopian highlands and its unique inhabitants. The olive baboons of the region are not like other primates. Papio anubis, as later naturalists would classify them, stand up to 3 feet tall and weigh over 80 pounds. Their canine teeth can reach 2 inches in length, longer than a leopard's, capable of inflicting devastating wounds. They live in complex troops of 50 to 100 individuals, with rigid hierarchies and sophisticated communication systems. They are intelligent enough to solve complex problems, remember individual humans for years, and to coordinate group attacks against threats. Most crucially, they are territorial. Violently, lethally territorial. The countryside around Gondar teems with baboon troops. Local farmers have developed an uneasy truce with them. Leave food offerings at the edges of fields, and the baboons will take only what's given, protecting the crops from other pests in return. Betray that trust, and entire harvests disappear overnight, stolen by primates that move through fields with organized precision. Fasilides sees possibility where others see nuisance. He consults with local hunters, with tribal elders who have studied baboon behavior for generations, with the few remaining Portuguese naturalists before their expulsion. Slowly, a radical plan takes shape. What if the baboons aren't pests to be avoided but soldiers to be recruited? What if their territorial instinct could be channeled, controlled, weaponized? Construction of Fasil Ghebbi begins in 1636. Portuguese architect Pedro Paes, one of the last Jesuits allowed to remain, oversees the stonework, creating a castle that blends Ethiopian, Portuguese, and Moorish architectural traditions. But while Paez focuses on walls and towers, Fasilides pursues his secret project. He orders the capture of young baboons from multiple troops, carefully avoiding taking so many that the wild populations are destabilized. These juveniles are brought to the castle grounds, still under construction, where they are raised alongside the Imperial Guard. The training program is unlike anything attempted before. The baboons are fed according to a strict schedule, always at dawn, always at dusk, never at night. They are given the freedom to roam the castle grounds during daylight hours, encouraged to become familiar with every courtyard, every tower, every wall. Guards are instructed to interact with them positively during the day, offering food, playing, establishing bonds. But after sunset, a different protocol takes effect. Anyone entering the grounds after dark, including guards, wears a special sash soaked in a mixture of animal musk and spices. The scent is overpowering, unmistakable. The baboons learn quickly this smell means friend, means safety, means the person wearing it is not to be touched. Without it, moving through the castle at night invites immediate, overwhelming aggression from animals that can see perfectly in darkness, that coordinate their attacks with military precision, that view the entire fortress as their territory to defend. By 1640, the system is operational. Fasil Ghebbi stands complete, a magnificent complex of castles, churches, and palaces spreading across 70,000 square meters. And within its walls, 4 troops of baboons, nearly 200 animals, serve as the world's most unusual security force. During the day, they are docile, almost playful, entertaining visitors and serving as living ornaments of imperial power. But when darkness falls and the great gates close, they transform into something else entirely. Silent sentries that patrol the walls, investigate suspicious sounds, and respond to intrusions with savage, coordinated violence. The system works flawlessly for years. Assassination attempts cease. The emperor sleeps soundly, knowing that no human can bribe a baboon, that no amount of gold can buy safe passage through his fortress after dark without the protective scent. Foreign diplomats marvel at the innovation. Some call it genius. Others whisper darker assessments, claiming Fasilides has dabbled in witchcraft, that the baboons are demons in animal form, that the castle has been cursed. But curses don't exist. What exists is something more troubling, the deliberate transformation of wild animals into instruments of state violence, a security apparatus that operates beyond human control or mercy, bound by instinct and conditioning rather than law or conscience. And like all such systems, it works perfectly, until the night it doesn't. Incident 1. The Merchant's Mistake. August 1649. Johannes, a wealthy fabric merchant from the port city of Massawa, arrives at Gondar with a caravan of silk and cotton intended for the imperial court. He has made this journey 3 times before, always departing before nightfall, always respecting the castle's curfew. But this year, negotiations over prices drag longer than expected. The sun sets while he and the imperial treasurer argue over the value of Egyptian cotton versus Indian silk. The treasurer, seeing darkness fall, offers Johannes guest quarters within the castle walls. The merchant declines. His caravan is camped outside the gates, and he fears thieves might target his goods overnight. He insists he will just slip out quickly, retrieve some additional fabric samples to seal the deal tomorrow, and return within minutes. The treasurer hesitates. He explains the protocol, the necessity of the protective sash for nighttime movement, but Johannes waves away the concern. He has been coming to Gondar for years. The baboons know him. He feeds them dates during his visits. They're practically pets, hardly the fearsome guardians of legend. Against his better judgment, the treasurer allows it. Johannes exits through a side door rather than the main gate, moving quickly across the eastern courtyard toward the outer walls. He makes it perhaps 50 feet before the first baboon drops from the parapet above, landing directly in his path. Then another appears from the shadows, and another. Within seconds, the merchant stands surrounded by a dozen of them, their eyes reflecting torchlight from the walls, their faces utterly expressionless. Johannes tries greeting them, speaking softly as he does during the day. He reaches into his robe for dates to offer. The baboons don't move. They simply watch him with an intensity that transforms them from animals into something alien, something operating according to rules he cannot comprehend. The merchant takes a step backward, toward the door he exited. The largest baboon, a male with a scarred face, bares its fangs and produces a sound between a bark and a roar. It's the treasurer who saves him, running from the building with a spare sash in hand, shouting for the merchant to freeze. He throws the fabric, and it lands at Johannes's feet. The moment the merchant wraps it around his shoulders, the baboons lose interest completely, dispersing into the shadows as suddenly as they appeared. Johannes stands trembling, understanding for the first time that the daylight animals he fed dates to are not the same creatures that own the castle at night. Incident 2. The Servant's Tragedy. January 1653. Desta works in the castle kitchens, a young woman from a village in the highlands, grateful for steady employment in the imperial household. She has worked there for 2 years without incident, always careful to leave before sunset, always respectful of the protocols. But on this January evening, her sister goes into difficult labor in quarters outside the castle walls. The midwife sends word, "Come quickly, your sister calls for you, it may be her final hours." Desta faces an impossible choice: wait until morning and possibly miss her sister's death, or risk the nighttime crossing. She has seen the baboons during the day, playful and curious. She has watched guards move through the grounds at night wearing the special sashes unmolested. Surely moving quickly, keeping to the shadows, she can make it to the outer gates. She waits until late, past midnight, when she assumes even the baboons sleep. She slips from the kitchen building, moving along the western wall toward the main gate. The courtyard lies empty and silent under a thin crescent moon. She makes it halfway across before she hears the sound, a low, rumbling vocalization coming from multiple directions at once. She freezes, her heart hammering, and understands she has made a fatal error. They come from everywhere, not attacking immediately, but surrounding her, cutting off every avenue of escape, moving with the coordinated precision of a military unit executing a practiced maneuver. Desta tries screaming for help, but her voice sounds small in the vast courtyard, swallowed by stone and darkness. The baboons tighten their circle, moving closer, and she can smell them now. A wild, musky odor that speaks of something fundamentally other than human. A guard on the outer wall hears her scream and sounds the alarm. Within minutes, a dozen soldiers pour into the courtyard, torches blazing, all wearing the protective sashes. They form a human wall between Desta and the baboons, shouting and waving their arms to drive the animals back. Slowly, reluctantly, the baboons withdraw, melting back into shadows and towers, their mission incomplete but their message delivered. The night belongs to them, and mercy is not in their nature. Desta survives, but the incident haunts the castle staff. Emperor Fasilides orders increased security protocols. The protective sashes are counted daily. No one enters or exits after sunset without explicit authorization and proper scenting. The baboon system, he declares, has proven its value once again. After all, an intruder would not have received a last-minute rescue. The servant's terror, in the emperor's calculation, is a small price to pay for perfect security. Incident 3. The spy who came too late. September 1661. Ali Hassan is not who he claims to be. The Yemeni trader presenting silk and spices to the imperial court is actually an Ottoman intelligence agent, sent to assess Gondar's defenses and identify vulnerabilities for a potential invasion. He spends 3 weeks in the city, playing his role perfectly, asking innocuous questions, observing guard rotations, mapping the castle's layout during permitted daylight tours. He learns about the baboons, of course. Everyone talks about them, but Hassan dismisses them as local superstition, exaggerated stories told to impress foreigners. He has seen trained monkeys in Cairo's markets, performing tricks for coins. He cannot imagine these Ethiopian primates pose any real threat to a trained operative. His plan is elegant in its simplicity. He will hide in the castle during the day, in a storage room filled with grain sacks where he has noticed the lock is faulty. After nightfall, he will emerge and gather detailed intelligence, troop numbers, weapon stores, the emperor's sleeping quarters. He has studied guard patterns and knows their rotation schedule. With careful timing, he should be able to move through the castle undetected and escape before dawn. The first part works perfectly. He conceals himself in the storage room, waiting through the afternoon as shadows lengthen and evening prayers echo from the castle's church. He hears the great gates closing, the sound of the guard changing shifts, the gradual quieting as the castle settles into night. By midnight, armed with a small shuttered lantern, he emerges. The castle's eastern wing is his target. Intelligence suggests this is where military planning occurs, where maps and strategic documents might be found. He moves through corridors he memorized during daylight tours, his soft leather shoes making no sound on stone floors. He's 10 minutes into his infiltration, already feeling confident, when he rounds a corner and stops dead. A baboon sits in the middle of the corridor, directly in his path. It's massive, easily the largest primate Hassan has ever seen, and it watches him with an expression that seems almost curious. Hassan freezes, barely breathing, willing the animal to lose interest and wander away. For a long moment, nothing happens. Then the baboon opens its mouth and produces a sound Hassan will hear in nightmares for the rest of his life. A bark that echoes through stone corridors, an alarm call that brings answering barks from throughout the castle. Hassan runs. It's instinct, overriding training, overriding everything except the primal need to escape. He makes it perhaps 30 feet before they're on him, not just the corridors, but a dozen others. Dropping from upper floors, emerging from side rooms, converging with terrifying speed. He tries fighting, drawing a concealed blade, but you cannot knife shadows that attack from every angle at once. Teeth find his arms, his legs, his back. He goes down under their weight, and in that moment understands that he will die here, torn apart by animals that serve an emperor who will never even know his real name. The Imperial Guard finds him in the morning, unconscious from blood loss but alive. The baboons, their territorial imperative satisfied once the intruder stopped moving, had simply left him there and returned to their posts. Hassan survives long enough to be interrogated, his true identity extracted through methods we need not detail, before being executed for espionage. His handler in Yemen receives word weeks later: infiltrating Gondar is impossible. The intelligence is lacking in details, but the conclusion is absolute. Whatever defends that castle cannot be overcome by stealth or skill. Incident 4. The Prince's Test, March 1665. Crown Prince Johannes, the Emperor's nephew and potential heir, has always questioned the baboon system. He views it as degrading beneath the dignity of a proper military power. Why should the Ethiopian Empire rely on animals when disciplined soldiers could provide better security? He argues this point repeatedly in council, suggesting that modern firearms and European training methods have made such primitive measures obsolete. Emperor Fasilides, aging now and tired of the debate, issues a challenge. The prince may test the defenses himself. He will attempt to infiltrate the castle at night, using whatever methods he chooses, with a full week to plan his approach. If he succeeds in reaching the emperor's chambers undetected, he may reform the security apparatus as he sees fit. If he fails, he must publicly acknowledge the baboon's superiority and end his complaints. Prince Johannes accepts immediately. He spends the week studying, consulting with foreign military advisors, developing an elaborate plan. He will approach from the least used section of the outer walls, using a rope and grappling hook to scale the fortifications. At a point he has observed, receives minimal guard attention. He will wear dark clothing treated with oils to mask his scent. He will move in utter silence, using techniques learned from Oromo scouts famous for their stealth. And most importantly, he will bring meat heavily dosed with a sleeping potion. If he encounters baboons, he will simply throw the drugged meat and slip past while they feast. The attempt begins on a moonless night. The prince scales the wall successfully, dropping into a narrow courtyard used primarily for storage. So far, perfect execution. He moves along the wall, staying in shadows, avoiding the torchlit areas where guards patrol. He makes it halfway to his goal before he realizes something is wrong. The baboons aren't where he expected them to be. The courtyard appears empty. Too empty. Then he understands, they're above him, on the walls, on the rooftops, in every elevated position, watching his progress with eyes adapted to perfect night vision. They haven't attacked because he hasn't yet triggered their response. He's moving slowly, cautiously, and hasn't yet invaded the core castle spaces they defend most aggressively. They're simply observing, tracking, waiting. The prince throws his drugged meat, scattering it across the courtyard. A few baboons descended to investigate, but most remain in position, ignoring the offering, and the prince realizes his fundamental error. These aren't scavengers driven by hunger. They're soldiers following protocols, and food means nothing compared to territorial imperative. He runs for it, abandoning stealth for speed, hoping to reach the central keep before the baboons coordinate their response. He almost makes it. The main door is 20 feet away when the largest male drops directly in front of him, cutting off his path. The prince tries to dodge left, but another baboon blocks that direction. Right, another one. Behind, 3 more. In seconds, he's encircled completely, unable to move in any direction without confronting animals that have practiced this maneuver thousands of times. This time, the prince has the protective sash hidden in his clothing, a safeguard agreed upon before the test began. He pulls it out and wraps it around his shoulders, and instantly the tension breaks. The baboons disperse, the corridor clears, and he walks the remaining distance to his uncle's chambers in humiliated silence. He has proven only what the emperor already knew. The system is perfect not because the baboons are individually dangerous, but because they are collectively impossible to deceive, bribe, or overcome through conventional means. The prince never speaks against the baboon guard again. If this story is giving you chills, hit that like button. Share this with someone who loves dark mysteries. Now let's discover what happens next. December 16, 1667, the Portuguese diplomatic mission arrives at Gondar with protest documents regarding trade disputes. Ambassador Miguel Ferreira has visited twice before and knows the protocols well. He presents his papers at the gate, receives permission to enter with his 2 assistants, and settles into guest quarters to await an audience with the emperor. The problem begins with the second assistant, João Costa. He is young, ambitious, and convinced that his diplomatic immunity grants him freedom to explore. During the afternoon, while Ferreira naps and the senior assistant reviews documents, Costa wanders the castle grounds. He feeds the baboons, watches them play in courtyards, confirms his growing belief that they are merely trained animals, no more dangerous than the monkeys he has seen performing in Lisbon's streets. That evening, over dinner with castle officials, Costa drinks too heavily. He boasts about Portuguese superiority, claims the baboon security system is barbaric and outdated, insists that a properly trained European soldier could walk through the castle at night without difficulty. The officials exchange glances but say nothing. Let the arrogant foreigner learn his lesson, their expressions suggest. Around midnight, Costa decides to prove his point. He slips from his quarters without the protective sash. He doesn't know where such items are stored, and his drunken state convinces him he doesn't need one anyway. He will simply walk through one courtyard, return to his room, and tomorrow triumphantly reveal his feat to the humiliated Ethiopians. He exits through a side door into the eastern courtyard. The night is clear, stars brilliant overhead, temperature dropping rapidly as highland nights do. Costa stands for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to darkness, feeling smugly confident. He takes 3 steps forward, and then he sees them. They materialize from shadows like nightmares given form, not rushing, not attacking yet, but simply appearing, on walls, in doorways, emerging from the darkness in numbers that seem impossible. Costa counts 10, then 20, then loses count as baboons continue revealing themselves from every concealed position. His alcohol-fueled confidence evaporates instantly, replaced by primal terror. He tries backing toward the door he exited, but baboons now block that path. He tries shouting for help, but his voice echoes uselessly in the stone courtyard. The circle tightens, slowly, inevitably, and Costa realizes with absolute clarity that he is about to die. He pulls out a small ceremonial dagger, useless against dozens of animals but better than facing death unarmed. The blade's appearance triggers the response he has dreaded. They attack as a coordinated unit. The first baboon hits him low, jaws clamping onto his calf with force that shatters bone. As he falls, others swarm him, targeting arms, throat, any vulnerable area. Costa's scree. AMs last perhaps 15 seconds before his windpipe collapses. The baboons don't feed on him. That's never been their conditioning. They simply eliminate the threat with brutal efficiency, then back away from the now motionless body. A guard on the outer wall hears the commotion and sounds the alarm. By the time the Imperial guard reaches the courtyard, Costa has been dead for several minutes. The baboons have dispersed, but the damage is absolute. The Portuguese assistant lies in a spreading pool of blood, his body displaying dozens of bite wounds, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Clutched in his hand are the tufts of brown fur that will later be found by the diplomatic team. Emperor Fasilides is informed immediately. His reaction is not remorse but cold calculation. The Portuguese will demand answers. They will claim Costa was murdered, will use this incident to press their diplomatic advantages. The baboon security system, so perfect for nearly 3 decades, has created an international incident. But there's worse news. The Emperor's intelligence network reports that Costa wasn't alone. His senior colleague, the experienced diplomat Paulo Rodrigues, also attempted a nighttime crossing, using the distraction of Costa's attack to slip through a different section of the castle. Rodrigues possessed the protective sash, acquired through bribery of a careless servant, and successfully penetrated deep into the castle's administrative wing before being discovered by human guards. Under interrogation, Rodrigues reveals his mission to steal documents detailing Ethiopian military strength and defensive capabilities. The Portuguese crown, he admits, has been planning a potential invasion for years, but accurate intelligence about Gondar's defenses has been impossible to obtain. The baboon legend has become so fearsome that even attempting infiltration seemed suicidal. Costa's drunken boast provided the perfect cover. While everyone focused on the fool walking openly into danger, Rodrigues used the chaos to pursue the real objective. Emperor Fasilides now faces a terrible realization. His perfect security system has failed not because the baboons failed. They performed exactly as conditioned, but because that very perfection created a single point of vulnerability. The protective sashes have become the target. An enemy need only obtain one to bypass the entire elaborate defense. What worked flawlessly against casual intrusion cannot prevent determined, well-resourced espionage. The morning of December 17th brings another horror. A second body is discovered beneath the western wall. This one a local merchant known to supply goods to the castle. Investigation reveals he had been attempting to scale the outer fortifications, possibly intending to steal from the treasury. Unlike Costa, he received no warning or opportunity to retreat. The baboons stationed on the walls simply pushed him off. A 40-foot fall that killed him instantly. The tufts of fur in Costa's hand came from this encounter, not from the eastern courtyard attack, suggesting the baboons had been dealing with multiple intrusions simultaneously. By noon, the castle is in crisis. The Portuguese ambassador demands the return of his assistants' bodies and reparations for what he terms murder by imperial pets. Local merchants spread rumors that the castle has become cursed, that the baboons have turned feral and might escape into the city. Religious leaders question whether using animals for security violates God's natural order. And in the emperor's council chambers, the once proud security innovation is being discussed as a liability, a dangerous experiment that has finally revealed its fatal flaws. The baboons themselves seem oblivious to the crisis they've created. As dawn breaks, they return to their daylight behavior, playful, curious, accepting food from handlers who approach with mixed feelings of pride and horror. They have done exactly what they were trained to do, protected the territory assigned to them with perfect lethal efficiency. That two men lie dead because of their conditioning means nothing in their primate consciousness. They are creatures of instinct and training, incapable of the moral calculation that now consumes their human handlers. The investigation into the night of December 16th-17th becomes the most thorough security review in the castle's history. Emperor Fasilides appoints a special commission led by General Wold, commander of the Imperial Guard, with orders to determine exactly what failed and how to prevent future incidents. Over the following months, the commission conducts hundreds of interviews, reviews decades of records, and performs experimental tests of the baboon security system. What they discover is both reassuring and deeply troubling. First, the reassuring part: the baboons themselves never deviated from their conditioning. They attacked only individuals without the protective scent who entered their designated territories after dark. Every recorded incident over 30 years shows the same pattern. The system, judged purely on its own terms, worked exactly as designed. The problem wasn't the baboons but the humans who either misunderstood the system, deliberately circumvented it, or became complacent about its requirements. The investigation reveals that João Costa had actually been warned about the nighttime protocols. Multiple castle officials mentioned the baboon security during his first afternoon at Gondar, but Costa, drunk and arrogant, interpreted these warnings as Ethiopian superstition designed to impress foreigners. His fatal error was cultural, not procedural. He simply couldn't believe that a sophisticated empire would genuinely rely on animal guards. Paulo Rodrigues's attempted espionage proves more concerning. The investigation traces his acquisition of the protective sash to a junior servant who sold it for a substantial bribe. Enough money to support his family for 6 months. The servant is arrested and, under interrogation, reveals that several other sashes have gone missing over the years, sold to merchants, foreign agents, and curious visitors. Most were never used for infiltration, simply kept as souvenirs or sold to collectors fascinated by the famous Gondar security system. But how many were used for successful espionage? How many times has the castle been penetrated by individuals wearing stolen sashes while the emperor slept soundly, confident in his baboon guard's perfection? The investigation can find no definitive answers. No military secrets have obviously leaked. No assassination attempt succeeded. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, and the mere possibility that the system has been compromised for years haunts the Commission's final report. The merchant found beneath the western wall. His name is eventually identified as Tades, a grain trader with gambling debts, was apparently attempting a simple burglary. His widow tells investigators he had become convinced the castle treasury contained enough gold to solve his financial problems. The baboons stationed on the walls did what they were conditioned to do when they detected a climbing intruder. They pushed him off. The fact that this resulted in death seems not to have been calculated into their response. They recognized climb wall at night equals threat and responded with the force necessary to eliminate that threat. General Wold's commission ultimately produces a 127-page report that Emperor Fasilides receives in April 1668. The document makes several key recommendations. First, implement a new sash design that changes monthly, with unique scents that cannot be easily replicated. This would make stolen sashes useless within weeks of their theft. Second, increase the number of human guards working alongside the baboons, creating redundant security layers so that even a properly scented infiltrator would still face human checkpoints. Third, begin gradual reduction of baboon numbers, transitioning toward a more conventional security apparatus that doesn't rely on animal conditioning. Fourth, establish clear liability protocols for deaths resulting from baboon attacks, distinguishing between legitimate security responses and avoidable tragedies. Fifth, consider implementing a complete curfew for anyone without explicit military authorization, eliminating the ambiguity about who should be moving through the castle at night. Emperor Fasilides accepts some recommendations and rejects others. He implements the monthly, changing sash system and increases human guard numbers. But he refuses to reduce the baboon population or establish clear liability frameworks. His reasoning, recorded in a response to the commission, reveals his fundamental philosophy. The baboons are neither innocent nor guilty. They are weapons performing the function for which they were designed. One does not blame a spear for piercing an enemy's heart. Neither should we blame creatures whose only crime is perfect obedience to our own training. The Portuguese diplomatic crisis proves more complicated to resolve. Ambassador Ferreira demands not just the return of his assistants' bodies, but financial compensation for their families and formal acknowledgement that the Ethiopian Empire's security system constitutes a violation of diplomatic immunity. Emperor Fasilides refuses all terms, pointing out that Costa ignored explicit warnings and Rodrigues was caught committing espionage. The diplomatic standoff continues for 2 years, during which Portugal and Ethiopia cease formal trade relationships. Ultimately, a compromise emerges. Ethiopia agrees to pay for the return of the bodies, and to ensure that future diplomatic missions receive enhanced security protocols, including mandatory protective sashes provided at the castle entrance. Portugal agrees to acknowledge that its diplomats violated Ethiopian security protocols and to cease intelligence operations targeting Gondar. Neither side admits wrongdoing, and both claim the resolution as a victory. The most significant aftermath concerns the castle servants and staff. The junior servant who sold the sash to Paulo Rodrigues is publicly executed in Gondar's market square, his death serving as a warning about compromising imperial security. But the execution creates a chilling effect throughout the castle workforce. Servants become terrified of making any mistake related to the baboon system, leading to excessive caution that sometimes backfires. Legitimate nighttime emergencies are sometimes not reported because staff fear being accused of protocol violations. One such incident occurs in November 1669, when a kitchen fire starts after midnight. Servants who discover it hesitate before raising the alarm, precious minutes lost to fear of being blamed for moving through the castle at night without proper authorization. The fire is eventually contained, but not before significant damage to one of the castle's auxiliary buildings. The incident forces another review of protocols, this time focusing on balancing security with practical emergency response. The baboons themselves undergo no punishment or retraining. General Wold's team considers various options, reducing feeding to make them more docile, introducing new conditioning to distinguish between degrees of threat, even relocating some troops to other locations. But animal behavior specialists consulted by the commission advise against changing anything. The baboon's current conditioning works precisely because of its simplicity. Night plus no protective scent equals threat. Introducing nuance would only create confusion and potentially more dangerous, unpredictable behavior. Instead, the baboon population is simply allowed to age naturally, with no new juveniles captured or trained to replace those that die. By 1675, the original 4 troops have dwindled to less than 100 animals total. By 1682, the year Emperor Fasilides dies, fewer than 50 remain. His son, Emperor Johannes I, inherits both the castle and the security system, but chooses to quietly let the baboon guard fade away entirely. The last trained security baboon dies in 1689, ending a security experiment that lasted more than half a century. The Gondar Castle baboon experiment represents one of history's most unusual intersections between military innovation and ethical horror. It raises questions that echo through subsequent centuries of security theory, questions about the nature of protection, the limits of instrumental reason, and the cost of absolute safety. From a purely pragmatic standpoint, the system worked remarkably well. For over 30 years, it provided genuine security against infiltration, assassination, and espionage. No ruler was killed during Emperor Fasilides' reign despite numerous plots against his life. No successful theft from the treasury occurred. The castle remained impregnable in ways that purely human guards could never have achieved. The baboons could not be bribed, could not betray their conditioning, could not be fooled by disguises or false identities. They were, in the narrowest tactical sense, the perfect sentries. But perfection in one dimension creates brittleness in others. The baboon system's absolute reliability on simple conditioning made it vulnerable to the one attack vector it couldn't defend against: exploitation of its own protocols. The protective sashes became the system's Achilles heel precisely because the baboons responded to them with perfect obedience. A human guard might question why someone wearing proper identification is moving suspiciously or appears unfamiliar. A baboon cannot question. It simply reacts to the presence or absence of the specific scent it was trained to recognize. The deaths of João Costa and Tadesse highlight another troubling aspect: the moral distance created by using animals as security instruments. When human guards kill an intruder, there exists at least the possibility of judgment, mercy, or graduated response based on assessed threat level. A guard might wound rather than kill, might accept surrender, might distinguish between a spy and a drunk stumbling through the wrong courtyard. Baboons possess no such discrimination. They attack with the same lethal efficiency whether confronting a foreign agent stealing military secrets or a confused merchant who took a wrong turn. Emperor Fasilides' description of the baboons as weapons reflects this moral distancing. If the animals are merely tools, no different from spears or fortification walls, then no one bears responsibility for deaths they cause beyond the basic question of whether they were deployed appropriately. But this framing obscures a more disturbing reality. These weren't inanimate objects, but living creatures capable of suffering, manipulation, and exploitation. The baboons didn't choose their role as castle guardians. They were captured as juveniles, conditioned through hygiene, 5 careful manipulation of their natural territorial instincts, and deployed in ways that inevitably led to violence. The experiment also reveals how security imperatives can override ethical considerations when rulers prioritize their own safety over broader moral concerns. Emperor Fasilides was not a cruel or unusual tyrant by 17th century standards. He was a pragmatic ruler facing genuine threats in a dangerous time. But his willingness to weaponize living creatures, to create a system where deaths would inevitably occur through animal attacks, suggests how security concerns can normalize what would otherwise be recognized as ethically dubious practices. This pattern repeats throughout history. Military forces have used dogs, dolphins, and even insects as living weapons. Intelligence agencies have exploited animals' sensory capabilities for surveillance. In each case, the utilitarian justification, these animals provide capabilities humans cannot match, tends to overwhelm questions about whether such use is morally permissible. The Gondar baboons were perhaps the earliest systematic attempt to create what might be called a living security system, but they were certainly not the last. The aftermath of the December 1667 deaths prompted surprisingly modern debates about liability and responsibility. If a trained guard dog attacks someone, who bears responsibility? The dog's trainer, its handler, or the institution that deployed it? The question has no easy answer, which is why Emperor Fasilides' commission ultimately avoided establishing clear protocols. Acknowledging responsibility would have undermined the system's whole purpose, but denying it entirely would have meant accepting that deaths could occur without accountability. The gradual phasing out of the baboon guard under Emperor Johannes I reflects a broader historical trend. As military technology advanced, Firearms became more reliable, surveillance techniques improved, fortification design evolved. The tactical advantages of exotic security methods diminished. By the late 17th century, the costs and complications of maintaining a primate security force outweighed its benefits. But this practical calculation conveniently avoided the deeper moral questions. Was the system ever justified? Were the baboons' lives and welfare given appropriate consideration? Should security needs ever justify instrumentalizing living creatures in this way? Modern security studies occasionally reference the Gondar baboons as a historical curiosity, but few scholars engage seriously with its ethical implications. This is partly because acknowledging the moral complexity would require confronting uncomfortable questions about contemporary practices. Military working dogs, for instance, face injuries and death in service to human security objectives. Is this fundamentally different from Emperor Fasilides' baboon guard, or merely a more socially accepted version of the same principle? The castle itself still stands in Gondar, a UNESCO World Heritage Site attracting thousands of visitors annually. Tour guides tell stories about the famous baboon guards, usually framing them as a charming historical quirk, evidence of Emperor Fasilides' innovative thinking. Rarely do these tours address the system's darker aspects, the captured juveniles, the deliberate conditioning for violence, the deaths that resulted from treating living beings as security apparatus. Wild baboon troops still inhabit the areas around Gondar. Some locals claim these are descendants of the original castle guards, that certain behaviors, wariness of humans at night, coordinated group movements, reflect the conditioning bred into their ancestors centuries ago. These claims lack scientific support but persist nonetheless, suggesting the baboon experiment left psychological scars not just on the human community, but possibly on the primate population itself. Perhaps the most troubling legacy concerns how quickly the unusual becomes normalized. Within a decade of implementation, the baboon guard system was simply accepted as part of Gondar's identity. Visitors stopped questioning it. Residents stopped seeing it as remarkable. The deaths of Costa and Tedes shocked people not because animals killed humans, that happened regularly in 17th century Africa, but because it created diplomatic complications and exposed the system's vulnerabilities. The moral question of whether the system should exist at all was rarely raised. This normalization process repeats across human history. Practices that initially seem extreme or questionable become routine through familiarity and institutional endorsement. The Gondar baboons killed at least 2 people, and likely injured dozens more over their decades of service. Each incident could have prompted fundamental reconsideration of the system. Instead, each became evidence for why the protocols needed refinement, not whether the underlying concept was sound. The question remains: did Emperor Fasilides create an ingenious security innovation or a cautionary tale about the costs of treating safety as an absolute value? The answer depends on what we weight more heavily, the undeniable tactical success or the ethical compromises required to achieve it. History offers no clear verdict, which perhaps tells us more about ourselves than about 17th century Ethiopia. We remain conflicted about how far security imperatives should push us, how much we should be willing to sacrifice or exploit in the name of safety, and where the line between protection and horror truly lies. What do you think drove Emperor Fasilides to create such an unusual security system? Was it genius, desperation, or something darker? Leave your theories in the comments below. Our community always has fascinating insights into these historical mysteries. And here's a question that keeps me up at night. If the baboon guard system was so effective, why didn't other rulers adopt similar approaches? Was it ethical concerns, practical limitations, or simply that the idea was too radical for most to contemplate? Share your thoughts. Subscribe to Fierce Sermon for more lost chapters of history where innovation and horror intersect in ways we're still trying to understand. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the past's darkest corners. And remember, the most terrifying stories are the ones that actually happened. See you in the next video, where we'll explore another historical event that blurs the line between security and nightmare.